Tonight, when everything gets quiet, you'll probably do something automatic. You'll reach for a switch. And just like that, darkness disappears. Rooms fill with light. Like nothing ever changed. It feels normal, basic, invisible. But that normal is extremely new. For almost the entire history of humans, night didn't have an on-off option. When the sun dropped below the horizon, the world didn't dim gently. It vanished. Not low light. Not hard to see. Actual darkness. The kind where distance disappears. Shapes dissolve. And your own body becomes something you can barely confirm is there. For hundreds of thousands of years, every human ancestor you have ever had lived inside that reality. Half their life was spent inside a world with no artificial light, no glow from screens, no lamps on demand, just darkness, fire, and waiting for morning. And the question becomes strange. When you think about it long enough, what do humans even do when the day ends and there's nothing left to see? The answer isn't just about survival. It's about who we became. It begins with fire, not as a tool, but as a boundary. Once humans learned to keep fire alive, night stopped being complete control by darkness. It became a shared space, a small circle of flickering light, cutting into something enormous and unknown. Outside that circle was everything dangerous. Inside it was everything human. Predators that hunted in silence stayed beyond that edge. Humans stayed within it. The fire didn't just warm bodies. It organized reality. It created an inside and an outside for the first time. And with that change came something even more important. Time. Before controlled fire, sunset meant shut down, climb, hide, freeze, wait. But fire extended the usable world. Hours that once belonged to uncertainty now belonged to awareness. And slowly, those hours changed behavior. Daytime became about movement, hunting, gathering, survival logistics. But night became something else entirely. Because when physical work stops, the mind doesn't. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies found a pattern that repeats almost perfectly across cultures. Daylight talk is practical. Nighttime talk is something else. Plans turn into stories. Information turns into memory. Facts turn into meaning. Around the fire, people don't just exchange survival data. They build shared imagination. Stories about ancestors. Stories about warnings. Stories about things that don't exist yet, but feel real enough to guide behavior. In that glow of firelight, humans weren't just passing time. They were building culture. But fire didn't solve the full problem of night. It only contained it. The body still had to decide what to do with the dark hours. And for most of human history, that decision wasn't what we assume today. Sleep wasn't one long collapse into unconsciousness. It was split. People would fall asleep shortly after night arrived. A deep first sleep, lasting a few hours. Then something unusual would happen. They would wake up. Not with panic. Not with confusion. But with awareness. And then, in the middle of the night, a strange quiet period began. No urgency. No artificial distraction. No expectation of immediate activity. Just stillness. People would talk softly. Reflect, pray. Sit in silence. Remember dreams. Or simply lie awake in the dark. Without treating it as a problem. Then later, sleep would return again. Until morning. 2 sleeps. 1 night. This pattern wasn't rare. It was normal across centuries. And then something changed it completely. Light stopped being limited. First came controlled street lighting in cities. Then oil lamps. Then gas lamps. Then electric bulbs. And suddenly, night was no longer a shared boundary between humans and darkness. It became something usable. Something extendable. Something editable. The night expanded. Work hours stretched. Entertainment grew. Sleep got compressed into a single block. And slowly, the older rhythm disappeared. Not because it stopped working, but because it stopped fitting the new world. Centuries later, when researchers revisited historical records, they found something surprising buried in plain sight. People used to describe a first sleep and a second sleep constantly. Across diaries, medical texts, literature, and legal records. But for a long time, historians misread it. They assumed it was metaphor, because the modern mind had no reference point for it. Then sleep experiments began to test something strange. What happens if humans are removed from artificial light entirely? The results were unexpected. When people lived under long natural darkness cycles, their sleep didn't stay consolidated. It split. First sleep, wakeful gap. Second sleep. And during that middle period, something interesting appeared. Brain chemistry shifted. The mind entered a calm, reflective state. Not alert like daytime. Not unconscious like sleep. A quiet in-between. People described it as peaceful, clear, thoughtful. Not insomnia. Something else entirely. But modern life erased it without noticing. Because once artificial light became constant, the boundary between day and night dissolved. The body stopped receiving the same signals it evolved under. Sunset no longer meant darkness. Darkness no longer meant rest. And screens made the illusion worse, turning night into something the brain still reads as daytime. So the old rhythm faded. And what used to be a natural pause between sleeps became something we now label as a problem. Waking up at night became insomnia. But biologically, it may not have always been that. It may have been a lost pattern of consciousness. A gap that once belonged to reflection. Instead of worry. Now night is different. We don't gather around fires anymore. We gather around light sources that never go out. We scroll instead of sit in silence. We extend the day instead of entering it. And the darkness that once shaped human thought is now something we avoid completely. But the body hasn't fully forgotten. It still reacts to light and darkness the way it did thousands of generations ago. It still expects cycles that modern life no longer provides. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, when everything is silent, and you wake for no reason, it might not be a malfunction. It might be something older than language. A rhythm the modern world simply stopped listening to. Because for most of human history, night wasn't something to survive. It was something to live through.